start? Welcome to the next session. Welcome to the next session. This will be on innovations in e-mental health, on the current state of solutions in many member states. And we have solutions ranging from teen health to dementia in our approach. And we have people representing companies, innovative approaches in e-mental health provision, as well as researchers from university providing latest evidence. We will first have a very brief input from all of our presenters, and then in the final half hour we will have a common discussion here on the floor. So I would like first to introduce Mark Göring. He's the co-founder of Aurora Health. He's also a psychotherapist, and I think you better introduce yourself. Yes? Okay.
Hello, everyone. So as she said, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm the founder of Aurora. Can you see the screens? Yeah. We run the app MoodPath. It's a digital companion for people struggling with depression. We have about 1 million downloads, about 120,000 monthly active users. And I just would like to make a couple short points that maybe will show kind of what the philosophy behind our company is in terms of digitization. So I'm sure many of you have seen these pictures. It shows, I think, displays digitization and the rapid growth of smartphones very well. This is 2005 in Rome. This is 2013 in Rome. So it's clear digitization is here. Digitization is having a massive effect on digital health already. One of the big examples is that the first touch point especially for mental health, has become online. In the English-speaking countries, we have about 10 million searches online for the keyword depression. At the same time, we see massive problems in the structural care of people with mental health. Everyone knows only about 50 people affected by depression ever get diagnosed. We have way too few psychotherapists, way too few psychiatrists even available for care. So I think the core problem in health is not so much trying to optimize current processes that we have, but we have to come up with something completely new, because simply the demand is way, way higher than the current supply. This is from a different presentation I gave. I put together some of the main alternatives that McKinsey last month put out, that digital opportunities that could help basically solve the problem. One is telemedicine. Just very briefly, I think does not hold very much potential for the area of mental health, because basically we're moving the problem from not enough supply from analog to digital. That won't really do the thing. Blended care is kind of in between. It can make current processes more efficient. I think there's a big place, an opportunity for that. But we believe that the area of unguided self-management, anything around automated systems, software systems where no human interaction is necessary, digital companions, is really the biggest potential. So just a couple points, maybe some hypotheses we could use for the discussion. Two things that I think are building stones for successful e-mental health. One is a complementary setup of a team. I think we need business competence, we need fundraising, we need companies that have the potential to run for a couple of years without having to make revenue quickly to build world-class products. We need the research part, and we need the design and tech part. The product design and the efficacy part is something. One more point I want to make is, if you look at research currently, I think you'll find that there's a trend saying that unguided self-help isn't efficient or doesn't work because people drop out. And my hypothesis is that the design of the solutions that have been in research are just not good enough. So you're basically making general statements about programs that don't have the validity to be generalized. And I think the big potential that will make e-mental health successful is personalization, using sensor data to basically personalize and go into the usual competences that psychotherapists would have. So these are the things we're trying to do with MoodPath. It's a journaling app. We give you insights, we give you assessments, and we have a pool of psychotherapeutic content that is then personalized and made by recommendations available to the user.
you have any questions, you can later ask directly the persons in the discussion. So the second presenter and discussant is Stefan Lütke. He is doing research at the University College of London and in Tübingen, and his main focus is on social cognition in adolescents with depression. So I'm happy to hear your input.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you, first of all, for having me. Well, I'd like to introduce you to the WhatsApp project. The WhatsApp project aims to predict depression in adolescents and children using smartphones and wearables. So, but let me first show you some figures about depression. Does it work? Okay. Well, there's some figures. 350 million worldwide have a depression, and what most people don't know, a lot of adolescents and kids are affected by depression. When you compare those figures, 200,000 kids in Germany having depression, if you compare this with cancer, guess what? In Germany, up to the age of 18, we got 5,000 kids with cancer, but 200,000 with depression. And for the business people in this audience, you can see there's a big health market, obviously. Alone in America, we got $210 billion of indirect and direct costs due to depression. Well, the problem is, it's not the first. So the problem in depression is actually the second line and the third line. So 70% of all the people with depression getting a depression over and over again, right? Or end up in a chronic depression, which usually lasts 2 years. So the first graphic is not, this is not a problem actually. The problem is having a depression every time again. And this is actually what costs the healthcare system. So the question is, how can we change this? And my question was, as a psychologist, why we fail actually, because we have effective therapy. We have also methods to prevent depression, but it's not working. So my answer to this question is actually, we are always too late. Yeah, I see the patients when they're already in the depression, but we have to start, well, earlier. So to my mind, prevention must be continuous. It must be a continuous monitoring. It must be simple. It must be basically like an Apple product. Yeah, it must be kind of sexy. Everyone wants to use it. And it must be individual and must be implemented in everyday life. So people basically live their life and they, well, only get bothered if something changes in terms of depression. So the idea would be like, we have the first depressive episode. I already said that's not the problem. So beside the treatment, the kids get a monitoring system, the early warning system. And before the next depressive episode starts, we will detect that there will be an upcoming depression. And then we have the chance to intervene before the depression is really on. So the idea, it's not working only with one. I always call it depressive markers. You have to have more markers. So we're going to use psychophysiology. So we're going to use heart rate and electrodermal activity. We're going to use motion acceleration, GPS. We're going to use markers in the voice of persons. We're going to use smartphone meter data. So how often you switch on the smartphone when you're calling someone. We're going to use WhatsApp. Not only WhatsApp meter data, but also what people write. So there's a link between how we use our language and depression. We can show that people with depression use more often the first person singular, so I, me, and my. And we're also gonna check, well, what we call as psychologists cognitive functions like attention, concentration, and memory by gamification, so by games. And we do this 24 hours, 7 days. And we're going to build an algorithm. This is a research project which aims to build this algorithm, put all the depressive markers together, and having at the end only one, well, let's say one core score telling you the next depression will come. So this project is funded or supported by those guys and this pretty much famous German entertainer. And yeah, I'd like to thank you and hopefully we have a nice discussion later.
Thank you very much, Stefan. You can have a seat if you like. Yeah. So the next speaker is Katja Lorenz. She's representing Mind Restrict. She is the business manager of the company and will briefly introduce their approach. Thank you very much, Katja.
Yeah, vielen Dank. I'll be presenting in German. Please bear with me. I'll be available in English for the panel discussion afterwards. Danke für die Einladung. Ich freue mich sehr, hier zu sein, mit Ihnen über E-Mental Health sprechen zu können. Wenn Sie sich schon mit dem Thema beschäftigt haben, ein wenig, dann haben Sie vielleicht schon Vorträge gehört, Artikel gelesen darüber, dass evidenzbasierte Online-Interventionen, wenn sie professionell begleitet sind, vergleichsweise wirksam sind mit Face-to-Face-Interventionen. Daher möchte ich mein Augenmerk für diesen Vortrag gern darauf richten, wie diese evidenzbasierten, effektiven Interventionen denn in die Versorgung implementiert werden können. Denn das ist ein wichtiger Punkt, wenn wir jetzt einfach weiterdenken und das als Common Sense akzeptieren, dass diese Interventionen tatsächlich wirksam sind. Einen kurzen Überblick über Mind District. Mind District wurde 2008 in den Niederlanden gegründet, ist seit 2011 auch in Deutschland aktiv. Es gibt auch eine Niederlassung in Großbritannien. Unsere Kunden sind Kliniken, Krankenversicherungen, Universitäten, mit denen wir gemeinsam Online-Interventionen entwickeln, aber auch EAP-Services beispielsweise. Wir sehen eine Vielzahl von Vorteilen in E-Mental Health. Sie sehen sie hier aufgelistet. Auch für die Einrichtungen, die Online-Interventionen einbieten, gibt es viele Vorteile. Sie können die Behandlungsqualität steigern, neue Patientengruppen erreichen und auch die Behandlungskosten senken, indem sie die Prozesse in ihrer Einrichtung optimieren. Was bedeutet jetzt E-Mental Health? Das ist ein sehr weiter Begriff, der übersetzt werden kann mit digital unterstützte Psychotherapie. Also traditionelle Gespräche werden durch Online-Inhalte ergänzt. Das können Module und Trainings sein, in denen Psychoedukation vermittelt wird, Übungen, die zu einer Verhaltensänderung führen oder auch Beispielpatienten ihre Reise hin zur Genesung berichten. Unterstützt werden diese durch Tagebücher, Fragebögen, Routine Outcome Measurements, die zur Eingangs- und auch Verlaufsdiagnostik genutzt werden können und natürlich auch Prozesse optimieren, wenn man die Daten nicht mehr im Gespräch erheben muss, sondern Patienten das eigenständig online tun können. Ein wichtiger Teil von E-Mental Health sind natürlich auch Kommunikationskanäle, die sicher sind. Ich höre oft von Therapeuten, dass sie schon WhatsApp benutzen, dass sie Skype nutzen, um in Kontakt zu bleiben mit ihren Patienten. Allen Datenschutzbeauftragten treibt es natürlich den Schweiß auf die Stirn und deswegen haben wir eine Ende-zu-Ende verschlüsselte GDPR-konforme Lösung entwickelt, um eben diese alltägliche Art der Kommunikation, die die Patienten gewohnt sind, auch online, auch sicher abzubilden. Zu guter Letzt bieten wir auch Schnittstellen an hin zu Klinikinformationssystemen. Wir wissen, dass in Kliniken schon eine Vielzahl von E-Health-Lösungen benutzt werden und nicht jeder Arzt möchte noch eine Plattform und noch ein Passwort, denn es soll optimiert werden, es soll effizient bleiben und da möchten wir uns gern auch an die Lösungen anbinden können, die schon vorhanden sind. Und wir haben ein Content-Management-System, mit dem Sie selbst Online-Interventionen entwickeln können für Ihre speziellen Patientengruppen, dass Sie eben auch Ihre Behandlungsabläufe, Ihre Routinen online in den Online-Interventionen abbilden können. Und wenn Sie das so in der Gesamtheit sehen, dann wird auch schnell klar, dass das nichts ist, was man einem Therapeuten so nach einem einstündigen Gespräch an die Hand geben kann und sagen kann, jetzt mach das mal erfolgreich, sondern das muss schon gut durchdacht werden, erst recht, wenn Sie noch einen Schritt weiter gehen und nicht nur eine Klinik digitalisieren, sondern eine ganze Region. Wie wir das in Holland gemacht haben, in Nordbrabant, dort gibt es ein Stepped Care Modell, das die ganze Region ganz niedrigschwellig versorgt. Patienten können Selbsthilfeinterventionen nutzen, 24 Stunden am Tag, 7 Tage die Woche sich anmelden und sofort mit Online-Interventionen beginnen. Sollten Sie mehr Betreuung benötigen, können Sie sich an Hausarztpraxen wenden, die die Intervention begleiten und notfalls eskalieren hin zu Psychotherapeuten oder sehr spezialisierten Behandelnden, die im holländischen Gesundheitssystem vorkommen. Genau, also da haben wir eine bedarfsgerechte, aber auch sehr niedrigschwellige Versorgung. Und wenn Sie auf dieser Ebene denken, dann muss es natürlich auch sehr gut durchdacht implementiert werden. Online-Interventionen sind wirksam und sie bieten einen echten Mehrwert gegenüber oder als Ergänzung zu Face-to-Face-Therapie. Also einerseits effizientere Arbeitsabläufe in den einzelnen Einrichtungen, Routineaufgaben werden abgenommen. Denken Sie an Home-Treatment, was Sie da an Fahrzeiten einsparen können. Und wenn Sie dann die integrierte Versorgung in Angriff nehmen möchten, dann ergeben sich natürlich auch sehr große Vorteile durch eHealth. Aber nur wenn das auf 3 Ebenen implementiert wird, dem Patienten erleichtert wird, auch den Therapeuten möglich gemacht wird zu wissen, was ist jetzt eigentlich dran, mit welchem Patienten spreche ich online, mit wem spreche ich face-to-face. Und auch in der Organisation muss klar sein, warum möchten wir das einführen, was ist unsere Vision, was sind die Kennzahlen, an denen wir erkennen, ob das auch wirklich funktioniert, wie können wir das Projekt steuern. Und dazu haben wir einen 6-wöchigen Implementierungssupport entwickelt, ein Konzept, das Einrichtungen ermöglicht, solche komplexen Prozesse geführt durch uns umzusetzen. Denn wir sehen uns nicht nur als Tech-Anbieter, sondern tatsächlich als Digitalisierungsconsultants. Vielen Dank.
Very much, Katja. So the next speaker is Clara Graffin. She is not working as a person representing a company, but she is focusing on outcomes of telemedicine approaches.
Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I would like to share my work that is about telemedical care and quality of life. And as a psychology, I deal with patient-related outcomes more than with other health outcomes. So, talking about the use of telemedical methods in the field of chronic conditions, but also psychological diseases, I talk about all healthcare services that are delivered over a certain distance by, as you can see, information and communication technology, but also for diagnosis, for treatment, or the prevention of diseases. So, and the telemedical methods is targeted on the improvement of certain criteria. For instance, clinical criteria, but also economic, physician-related or patient-reported criteria, such as the acceptance or the quality of life. And the concept of the quality of life became established as one of the most important outcomes when we evaluate interventions in that field. So that's why I focus on quality of life right now. So after the definition, sorry, I really have some problems with the height right now. After the definition, the quality of life is a multidimensional construct with many facets. So not only including the physical state or the psychological health, but also the personal beliefs, the social relationships, expectations, and goals. So, and it's very important to highlight that quality of life is a patient-reported outcome. So the patient itself is the only valid source for measuring this construct. As you can see, there are different levels of quality of life. So more generic levels, like the quality of life itself, but also more specific levels like the health-related quality of life, or even the disease and condition-related specific quality of life. And it's all the same that these concepts are measured by standardized questionnaire mostly. So, what I did now in our project, we analyzed generic and specific multidimensional questionnaires for the measurement of quality of life, and it was noticeable that these instruments were not sensitive enough for the aspects of quality of life that should be improved by telemedical care interventions. For instance, the disease-related feeling of control, or even the perceived security. So what we highlight now, or what we think would be useful would be a setting-related quality of life component to add to the specific or generic quality of life instruments. So, and here you can see the team of the TeleQL project, and this project group addresses this methodological issue. So you can see people from University of Greifswald are working together with people from University of Medicine in Greifswald and the Telemedical Center in Brandenburg. And we have certain aims that we want to address. For instance, the identification of core facets of patient experiences of telemedical care in terms of patient-reported outcome related to telemedical care specifically, but also a reconceptualization of quality of life in the context of telemedical healthcare. And last but not least, we want to develop an add-on questionnaire for assessing the setting-related quality of life aspects in telemedicine. So, there's a long process in our project group. So first we conducted a systematic literature review. Right now we're having many qualitative interviews and focus groups with not only patients but also healthcare providers and stakeholders. And next year we want to test our questionnaire in a broad patient group. We target not only chronic condition but also psychological diseases, because we're not able to address all disease groups in one project, but we want to have complementary disease groups to have a very broad content we have to deal with. Just a quick overview, if I have time, okay. There's quality of life in telepsychiatric care, and I've got many talks with patients and stakeholders right now, and it seems to be important that telemedical interventions provide some kind of possibility of social contact for the patient. So it's kind of important, for instance, for depression, or patients of depression, that the telephone rings only for the patient itself. That means that the medicine is very patient-centered, that the patient perceived security. So they care for me, or my husband is safe even if I'm not around. So this is a big pro for the telemedical healthcare services. But it's also a link between the inpatient stay and the everyday life, and it empowers the patient for its own disease. So thank you very much. I want to highlight that we're still looking for professionals and stakeholders that we would like to involve in our expert interviews. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. So maybe effectiveness research will move ahead. And I will now introduce Marco Essig. He is the CIO of Telesci in Germany, another company promoting these innovations.
Okay, hello, thank you for inviting me. I will keep it short because my colleague from Mine District told everything I wanted to say. I'm Marco Essig, Managing Director and founder of Telesci. I have some short slides. We develop also e-mental health. We have a blended approach. We have hundreds of questionnaires therapists can use. We develop psychoeducational videos, texts, exercises like mindfulness. We also develop journals like a mood diary or alcohol diary, and of course modules, also video conferencing and chat. In a difference from what Mark just said, we use the blended approach. We are also founded in Holland. There also we started with self-help modules, and we think they can be effective. But what we saw was that the rate of people not finishing the modules was high. So during the years, the self-help approach moved more and more to the blended approach. So now in Holland, most companies, like also Mine District, follow the blended approach. for us also. So the therapist is in the driver's seat, and he can use what I just explained, hundreds of questionnaires, modules, everything he needs to treat patients. Maybe short some figures about us. We are founded in Holland, but we also have an office in Germany. We just started recently, a few months ago, with a large project with Technische Krankenkasse, University of Munich, Frankfurt and Hamburg, and the Hausärztliche Verband with a large blended care project, what we're starting now in Germany. But we also have an office in Manchester and in Belgium. About 2,500 organizations work with our software, 10,000 therapists, and they provide service to under 50,000 patients per year. So that's us.
So let's start the discussion. I think many of you have a psychological background. You are even psychotherapists, maybe working in private practice. That's why I would like to ask you first, Mark, why are you doing this? You do not sound like a psychotherapist. You sound more like a business manager.
Well, I think I have kind of two hearts in my chest. So I'm a tech entrepreneur, and I love doing that. But I also love clinical psychology. I just simply think that, as I said in my little presentation, the demand for help in the psychological area is huge. And as Stefan said, it's not only just one depressive episode that needs some kind of treatment and then it's over. For people fighting with depression, there's always constantly the fear and the danger and the stress vulnerability model to fall back into a depressive episode. So basically, they need continuous care, continuous resources that are there, available, and accessible for them at any time. And that just won't happen in classic ways. We can increase the number of psychotherapists and social workers and anything by 10 times the amount we have now. We probably still won't be able to meet the demand. And seeing the digital revolution, seeing how smartphones have gone through into the daily life of almost everyone and have been changing behavior effectively, fitness and meditation and other apps that are massive in the market right now and doing, I think, a lot of good for behavioral health. I want to do that, so that's why I'm doing this.
So you see your target mainly in the prevention or relapse preventive area, also directed to the others, or do you see this also as primary psychotherapy?
Well, I'll start. I think I see it throughout every single step of it. I think, as I said also in my presentation, we have a massive amount of people that aren't recognized and they're looking for help online. So meeting them there, that's the first thing we wanted to do with our app MoodPath. So what it offers is a qualified assessment. You do it for 14 days. You answer questions in a journal type design, and then we give you an assessment. We say we think there's evidence or we see evidence for a depressive episode or not, and then we try to do the referral also. We try to give information and help into a network also that we're starting to build up where they can go into primary care, but then they can still continue to use it in a blended care approach or also in a combination with others. And once they're finished there and they have maybe co-used some things like some modules, some of the content, they can use that as resources in their daily life to help them sleep better, to help them be mindful, to help them reduce stress, increase competencies and social skills and emotional skills, and use that throughout their life.
Would you also like to comment?
No, I can agree on it's a good thing to hear that you also use a blended approach. For us, it's the same. For us, the only difference is for us, the caregivers in the driver's seat, and it's the same for when people are on waiting lists. For example, you can give them a module. We recently developed the ACT module, which people can use, and it happens a lot that when people are waiting for care, that the depression goes away itself. So yeah, self-help can work absolutely, but for us, the caregiver is in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I would like to say that the big issue in depression and basically in mental health at all is prevention. It's not so much about therapy, it's more about preventing those states. And as I said, well, just to give you an example, one of my patients, so I'm a clinical psychologist as well and treating kids and teens. And she's 17, she already had her third depressive episode. It's clear she will have it for all of her life. So if you would start after the first episode and having a preventing system which should be implemented in everyday life, it shouldn't be bother the kids, yeah, they should live their life as they would like to. And only then when something happens, the state is deteriorating, then they need actually help. That's it, yeah.
Katja, you mentioned that you work more on the implementation side. Why, or you are trying to deliver the whole system. What is your rationale behind this statement?
Yeah, we want to enable clinics or healthcare organizations in general to empower their patients to master their own well-being and provide more access to more patients. Because as you mentioned, there are a lot of people that are not treated at this point, and we believe that e-health can be a very easy access into care. At the same time, we don't think we have to constrain this to a certain setting, either prevention or regular treatment, but eHealth offers solutions for every step of the patient journey. So in Germany, the insurance companies use eHealth already for prevention programs for mental disorders. We also see it used in ambulant care or stationary inpatient care, also in group settings and in aftercare, of course, especially in the rural areas where it is hard to find a psychotherapist after you had treatment in a clinic. So eHealth is not restrained to a certain setting, a certain patient group, or a certain care provider. It can offer solutions for every possible setting, but in order to put that potential to use, you have to look at every institution and do the implementation properly so that the patients can really benefit, and at the same time the therapists are also comfortable using the technology, otherwise they won't do it. Yeah.
May I comment? Well, I mean, it offers for everyone something, right? But it has to be individual. I mean, the depression is not always the same, so that's why the idea we're going to create an algorithm which is really individual, fits to every single person, because so far we see, well, usually e-health, so far to my mind, is you take cognitive therapies which are already there and implement this in apps, right? But which is not really, well, okay, it works, but that's not really individual. So you just take what actually is there and put it in a smartphone, basically, right? So I think we have to come more to more individual solutions, actually.
Yes, I agree completely. May I say something? Okay. I agree completely with you, and we have developed a transdiagnostic approach. We don't have one online intervention for depression, although this is wanted by the healthcare system, but we try to shift it to transdiagnostic personal routes where the therapist, who is in the driver's seats, can, well, in a treatment setting at least. In prevention, it's something different. But in treatment setting, you don't go through a strict protocol when you have a face-to-face session, right? You listen to the needs of the patient, and then you talk about the topics that are relevant. And we want to offer, or we do offer, the same thing online by having small chunks of informations that you can then put together to a personal routes according to the needs and the topics relevant for individual patients, and I think that is very crucial for the compliance. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to also say that I agree. We also have a very flexible how the program works. So a patient is never just depressed. You're depressed with a slice of financial problems and a slice of personal disorders, or so the module has to be tailor-made for the patient. Yeah, so we agree.
Can I comment one more thing? I think the biggest potential for this kind of personalization is not so much the current way where maybe we have validated questionnaires like the project you have that have been in the market for many years and are very static, retrospective ways of trying to gather information about patients. But more, I think that's also the way that Stefan is trying to go with his WhatsApp project, and that's also the way we're going with GPS data. We have a project with Columbia University. We're integrating with Apple Health and trying to get wearable data to see from activation patterns, from GPS patterns, from any other sensor data that we can get. And I'm sure most of you know Tom Insel from the States, longtime director of the National Institute of Mental Health, who now has founded his own startup called MindStrong, completely focusing just on sensor data from smartphones to detect depression. And I think after 10 years of understanding the problems in mental health care, that's where he sees the biggest potential. And I kind of just would agree that I think for personalization, sensor data will beat it all.
Thank you. So you demonstrated that you both try to reach the entire population as well as work on the personalization level. I would like to know, because all of you are very optimistic, and we have encountered this last year as well, which patients do you not reach? Do you have difficulties with some groups? Did you encounter, from the clinical perspective, obstacles before moving to other obstacles, but maybe first from the clinical perspective?
For us, not. We have patients from 2 years old until 85 years old. We do a lot of questionnaires also.
From 2 years old.
Then the parents use the questionnaires, for example. Age is never a problem. I think what's more of a challenge is legislation. Then everybody has a smartphone. Everybody uses a computer, even if you're 80 years old, and also when you're 10 years old. So no, we have no difficulties in reaching people, but it's sometimes difficult when legislation is not working with you.
Katja?
Yes, I'd like to second that. We see the same thing. So even the 80, 90-year-olds who want to use Mind District, they do it together with their family, for example. So it at the same time activates personal resources, social resources, and gets people talking about mental health, which we think is a good sign. The restraining factors are indeed the mechanics of the healthcare system. So legislation and reimbursement are in our view, I think, the most restricting factors.
Well, we're working also with patients. I would say that I think the way psychotherapy should shift or should develop is that the focus should be more on the interpersonal problems and problems in identity, problems in social behavior that needs a second person to be able to basically reflect in one room. So I think anyone that is really where the core problem of the mental issues are on a personality level, there I'm more skeptical about the benefits of e-mental health. I think then e-mental health's main challenge or task is to identify and then bring the right people into the mental health care system that is still face-to-face, traditional the way it is right now, but keep the people that could benefit first from a e-mental health solution, and then not clog up the system out of the system as well. So I think we won't reach, at least our solutions won't reach people with personality disorders.
Well, being a scientist, I have to be skeptical always. And I think with this solution, preventing solution, I think we could help 50%. But I mean, if you have seen someone with a severe depression, and we also have biological causes, genetic causes, and we will never get everyone. That's too optimistic. Yeah,
why not? Because, for example, in Holland you have. It's called 113 online. They do only suicidal patients with very, very, very severe problems. Because realize that e-mental health means using internet technology to help people. That can also be sending an email or doing a chat or doing a module. So I think you can reach everyone, except maybe not a complete treatment module from beginning till end, but you can reach, you can help everyone with e-mental health.
Yeah, but you will think of theoretical models in depression. I mean, I think with e-mental health, you not always fight the reasons, the causes of depression. It's more like the American way, saying, well, okay, positivity is psychology, but I think much more you have. Sometimes you always you have to talk to people and going into deep actually. So I think that's too simple actually, because well, the brain is the most complex organ, and thinking of just giving someone an app and mental health works. And I've seen so many apps so far and startups actually not on the market anymore. Which is lacking is usually, to my mind, quality. We really need quality standards, like in medicine. Well, before a pharma company brings a new medicine on the market, usually it takes 10 years and a lot of studies. And I have seen basically not many startups or a solution having evidence-based apps so far. So we need much more science in evidence-based medicine, which is really expensive for the companies. That's the problem usually. But I don't see any quality standards in Germany so far. I mean, the German Association for Psychiatry just started to create standards. Yeah.
So maybe, second, Clara, do you think at the moment that there is enough evidence in order to convince the political stakeholders?
Well, evidence, depending on which questions. I think there are lots of studies that address the issue of the results, the outcomes, the clinical outcomes, but also the patient-orientated outcomes. So there are a lot of studies, I guess, but still not enough evidence for every issue, like every disease or every patient group, or even certain patient-centered outcomes. So that's still missing, and maybe we should really focus more on the patient itself than the clinical or the economic outcomes only.
Oh no, I just wanted to say we have to define what is e-mental health. And e-mental health, what I said, is using technology in mental health care. So, for example, in Holland, you are obligated by law to use questionnaires and report about the outcomes to a benchmark institute. There's a lot of discussion about it, but everybody in Holland in mental health care uses digital questionnaires. That is e-mental health. And all questionnaires are validated. The use is proven effective. And it's not just because I agree, not everybody fits in the treatment module from beginning till end. No, I even think most people are not. But you can use certain elements, digital elements in care, and that's your solution or everybody's solution can work guided or not guided. That's what I wanted to say. But in Holland, everybody uses e-mental. There is not a care provider who doesn't. And in Germany, hopefully soon as well.
Just an example, so you get what I mean actually. In Germany, we got, for instance, a Berlin-based startup called Self-Appy, which offers, what do you say actually? Yeah, basically like supportive therapy for people with depression and anxiety disorders. And being a scientist, I asked, okay, where's the evidence? And they said, okay, we did a study with the University Hospital in Hamburg, but when I looked into the data, it was not like a study. It was 60 patients, and but they're struggling because they need money to do studies, right? That's the problem, and it's the same. Well, like with Mark, actually, I tried to convince him to get in one of those research projects, but they had to pay some bucks actually to be part of this BMBF project. And for startups, it's really difficult actually to have the money to make, or would you agree, to make big studies actually, which to my mind are needed to have the evidence.
Maybe it's even less the problem about the money or the funding. I mean, right now we're in a good situation because we have a venture capital company behind us giving us funding, but even just the speed that we can operate with together with universities. We do have cooperations with many universities. Our first step is to validate our assessment, our screening system. The second step is to validate or at least evaluate the efficacy of the interventions. But this is, you have to think in 2, 3, 4 year periods here. And if you want to build a company like ours, you have to think more from 6 months to 9 months until you run out of money again, and you need to get new investors, and you need to find out what the business model will be. So that makes it more difficult. The speed, and also I think people in science have trouble. I mean, it's very difficult, obviously, to keep up with the technological speed too, and it needs new paradigms of how to do very, very quick evaluations. Right now we have about 3,000 downloads per day, so we can generate massive amounts of data in no time, in very, very little time. And we make our decisions. We base our decisions basically on a weekly basis based on the data we get, and we make changes to the product, obviously. But that's completely outside of every paradigm of medical regulation, medical device regulation there is, and there's just no alternative. There's no standards how we can operate, so we just have to do it by the best practices, best way we can.
Katja?
We have a slightly different approach. We develop our own modules as well and find partners to evaluate them with, but you are right, this is very expensive. As an alternative, we cooperate with universities and give them our content management system and have the researchers develop their own interventions. They are state-of-the-art experts in psychotherapy in general, and they know all the manuals, and they can develop a high-quality online intervention and then evaluate it within the same research project. And there is funding for that. So there's European funding, but also on the German local funding. Because we want universities to be able to develop their own projects, and it is helping with compliance, because if therapists hear that this module was developed not by a tech company but by a university that has experience because they're treating patients themselves in Institutsambulance, then this is much more easier to accept for a therapist as a new working tool. Thank you.
In Germany, we have still the problem that we have a kind of selection bias in terms of who we reach. I guess you do not have the problem. Do you reach people who do not like Yes. Yes? Technological prone persons?
Oh, no, the bias on e-mental health is enormous. That's why I always think that lawmakers, insurance companies can help by giving a bonus for working efficiently. But in Germany, for example, what I just said, in Holland, everybody uses digital questionnaires. It's not a question if, but which product you use. In Germany, sometimes you have discussions about paper and pencil. Why is digital better than paper and pencil? And then you have to discuss with people, yes, but it goes a lot faster, and why spend 45 minutes calculating scores if a computer can do it in a fraction of a second? Yes, but it's not safe. Yes, but no, internet program is not 100% safe, but I think more patient data is on the street because someone left the file on his desk, or it was stolen or left in a restaurant or whatever. So no, it's not 100% safe, but yeah, people are skeptical, and you have to convince people that digital works, and we have to do research. And yeah.
I really have to agree. In Germany, sometimes it's really ridiculous. I mean, with my study, it's like I got the approval of the ethical commission, or the ethical board. I also got the approval from the data security officer from the university hospital, and I still have to discuss with the head doctor whether I can run the study actually. Yeah. So I think this time, I think it's the same you said. I think we had this also in the panel before. America is much faster. I mean, you can see Facebook doing research on how to predict suicide using their data and stuff. So in Germany, it's really the politics are too slow.
Clara, one comment?
Just reacting to what you actually said. I think you don't only have to convince people, but educate people, because I was talking to a lot of patients recently, and what I got to know is that they started the telemedical treatment out of curiosity. So they didn't have any expectations. They don't have any fears or critics, but they wanted to start because it's actually something that could help them. So they reach for every medical help they could get, and I think that's one of the most important things to educate people first.
I would also now like to ask you in the audience whether you have any specific questions or comments or issues you would like to raise in the final 5 minutes. Yes.
Hi, Hi, thank you. I'm also doing research regarding IoT and healthcare, so I have a question. First of all, how to deal with trust issue. We all know we face a person face by face. It's easier for us to build the trust, and it's especially very important in psychological therapies to build up the long-term relationship with the patient. How do you make sure the patient can trust when it's just through a phone or computer for therapy sessions? And how do you think the data you collected through online is reliable? Because people may lie and find it much easier to lie when it's just a phone or computer in front of them instead of a real person. And the second question is that obviously e-health has tremendous help in getting patients to the help they need, but still a lot of times when in real time, then when they try to make appointments with a doctor, a lot of psychologists say we're already full, we don't take new patients. And then I'm just wondering, do you offer, like, you have like obviously 3 startups here, and then do you offer any solutions in helping patients just to make the first step in setting up appointments with the available doctors in the area? Because I have lost a colleague recently in my department to suicide, and he's only 35. My own grandma also committed suicide because of depression, because of lack of help. So I'm just wondering, yeah.
Thank you very much for the question, Stefan.
Yeah, maybe I can answer at least if the first question. Well, the best answer is I don't have a smartphone myself, right? So when people doing research with me, they can be sure I really take care of data security. We really huge data security concept, and everything is stored in German's servers. So I think that's the data is really, at least for the science, is really safe or secure. And the next question was like, you're talking about reactivity. In our study, we always ask our patient at the end of the study, how did you feel? So we make a kind of a quality check. Did they change their behavior? But to my mind, it doesn't make sense to change the behavior, because when we have the system, why should they lie? Because the idea of the system is actually to help. So it's the same when you go to a doctor. I mean, sure, if you don't say the truth, he can't help you, right? So it doesn't make much sense to lie, actually. So that was the first question for me.
Yeah. I also found it very interesting, because it's the other way around. People are more honest against a computer than to a face-to-face person. And we worked together with Maastricht University, and for example, we did a research on alcohol abuse, and in 60%, and 60% is really a lot, our computer signaled the alcohol abuse, and the patients didn't tell their doctor. So it's the other way around. People have a feeling of animosity when they're talking to a computer, so they're more honest. And if there's a therapist behind the computer, then they can use that information to help the patient better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at least in part, I agree. I know some research on post-traumatic stress disorder treatment, where there's a concept called intimacy through distance, where it's basically a bit easier to open up and confront yourself with very tough topics when there's basically something in between on the digital level. To your second question a bit, so what we're trying to do in terms of referring people from the digital products into the real world is build up partnerships. We have some partnerships with the TK, with one of the German big insurance companies that offer at least a valid, good online depression coach, they call it, which is kind of a guided self-help program. We have a cooperation with the biggest clinic group here, with another second clinic group on rehabilitation. So we're trying to build up partnerships to then basically guide through from the digital into the face-to-face healthcare.
This is probably a very complex question, and maybe you have time to follow up this question in a discussion after the session. We are running a bit out of time. But finally, as a final question, I mean, the beauty of the system is that it looks like it can provide minor interventions, very small interventions, but it looks like the work behind this and the complexity is so big. So as a final question, I would like to hear from you, is it really worth doing it? And is it maybe too complex? Is it too much work for too little intervention?
it is worth it, and especially when I heard what you told about your experience with your family and your colleague, it is worth giving hope to people who are waiting for months to have to meet a psychotherapist. It is worth for the psychotherapist to offer something for the waiting time in between, to give the patient hope, to empower the patient to start working on their challenges. Because we can be with the patient in their everyday life when we offer them online interventions. And I know this is a provocative question, but it is worth it, and it is worth because so many people are suffering.
Another final comment?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Obviously, I think it's worth it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. And regarding the complexity, I think it's important to face the fact that no one really understands a lot about psychology of depression, for example. We don't know how to treat it very well. We give antidepressants. They work in about 30 to 40% of cases, not more. And psychotherapy doesn't work much better either. So, but we do know there are some techniques that help. We know that mindfulness meditation helps. We know that there are some things we can do to sleep better, to distance ourselves from thoughts, to cope with emotions better, to build relationships. So these things, I think these ideas behind those are the complexity. Those are the things that people can learn, and I think they can learn on their own in guided and unguided programs. That's what we want to do.
So thank you very much. I think this is a nice final word. I thank all of you for this inspiring input and discussion, and I thank you for your audience and your questions. And there will be another section now on digital prevention if you are still interested. So thank you very much all.